Hi, welcome back. I am your guide, your host, Tom Van Ness of Guide Through Grief. With me here in season one, yet again, Bob Woolsey, our co host, my guide through these conversations. Bob, hello, welcome back.
How are you, Tom? Good to
And
see you.
good to see you. We were just before we got going, we were talking about we just got done with Easter. We are getting 3 weeks through the month now. April's a tough, weird month. Easter's one of those reasons why. April's also the anniversary of Leslie's passing. So, always a lot of time of reflection. That'll be discussed in another episode later down the road. But that was a little bit of how we got started before today. And that kind of leads in to a little bit of what anniversaries can create and uh, can stir inside you is some anxiety. It can stir sadness. It can stir all these kinds of emotions. And what I found myself doing when I would get these swell of emotions are getting into distractions and trying to run away from some of these feelings and uh, emotions that I had stirring inside me. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is some distractions and some addictions. Bob, before we get going, how are you doing? How have you been? How was the holidays?
Doing very well. Grateful to be here. Excited to talk about this topic of addictions, distractions, which, whether you've been through a traumatic experience or not, are very relevant. And excited to go down the path and through the journey and uncover what we uncover, and hopefully, in the process, give some people something they can relate to and a couple nuggets that they can take with them and make their journey a little easier.
Yeah. And I know you in your grief journey, it's a different holiday for you. For us, Easter is one that hits really hard. I know for you, it's around Christmas. So some of these discussions may ring true to you as well, and you'll notice. And so feel free to chime in. And I think one of the first topics to talk about on the distractions were for me initially after Leslie passed, the distractions I kind of for me were pretty easy to fall into and I think healthy enough to fall into. There were things like the boys, my job, and Leslie's parents. Like if I would say like the three things I threw myself into the most after that happened were those three things. I routinely um, found trust in the friends and the family around me that they wouldn't let me fall off the cliff. So I could kind of throw everything I had at those items, at the boys, at Leslie's, parents. Um, I took about a couple weeks off after Leslie's passing, then went right back into work. So that's what kind of were my distractions. They were excuses to focus on other things in myself, if that's one way to put it. You and I met not too long after that, Bob. I think it was like 2 weeks after.
Yeah, it was a couple weeks after, and I remember it being a conversation that moved me and really, truly made me think about things like I hadn't thought about them before. And it was, I'm sure, a traumatic time for you, but the way you handled it, um, really being open and honest and truthful and raw, um, I think it helped me and others. And I guess my question to you as it relates to distractions, like, you talked about your kids and Leslie's parents and work. What else did you throw yourself into as far as, distractions? I know you were setting up a
Yeah.
foundation and you were just go, 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 which is a little bit how I'm wired. And I think that's how we relate well to each other. But talk
Yeah.
about that.
No, I think the go 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 was part of the distraction. I still struggle today to sit down and just be still. Uh, these episodes that we sit down and talk are some of the longest stints I have spent in 2 years just being still. Maybe that on, and then on my therapy appointment. Um, Being still escalates into having a still mind. And that's, those were a lot of the other things. Getting the endowment started, once that got started the week after she passed, that kind of take cares of itself, except for like once a year when you have to start considering the awards and the corporations, or um, the different organizations that those programs can go to. So that didn't take a lot of effort. What I started to throw myself into were self-inflicted or excuses to not focus on myself. The boys started to settle down and get into school. Leslie's parents were doing great. Um, I was getting settled back into my previous job, or I did go through a job transition and start a new job. So that gave me a whole nother thing to kind of focus on. So that would probably be, that was a big distraction. I don't think it was meant that I needed to leave my last job. For our listeners and viewers that don't know that part of my story, or maybe forgot about that part of my story, Leslie and I worked together. We worked within 100 steps of each other for the last 5, 6 years uh, of her life. It was also, we worked at a company that my family owned and sold 3 years before she passed away. We were still both working for the new company that purchased us. So there was just too much change that happened in that bout of time. So it was just time to change jobs. Um, so getting back on point, sorry. The the next level of distractions that I threw at myself were Dave Matthews concerts, were cleaning the house, or like organizing things around the house. Like I still do that quite a bit, or at least I have a schedule of doing it. Um, and then really, I guess it kind of goes with the Dave concerts, but I did a lot of traveling. The boys and I did a lot of traveling in like the first year and a half after Leslie passed away. And then I focused a lot on relationships. Those were relationships with friends that I grew up with that I haven't connected with recently, or those were new friends that we had in the neighborhood because we just moved into this house not even 2 years, a year and a half before Leslie passed away. Um, and then trying to have relationships with some of Leslie's friends and getting to know some of her friends and people like that after her passing just seemed to be the next level of distractions.
So, would you say if you were talking to somebody going through a similar journey that distractions can be a healthy thing?
I think everyone needs some type of distraction from grief, from trauma, you know, picking up a book, having a job to go to, watching a TV show. I think even to an extent of like the Dave Matthews concerts I went to, I think for a good part of the time, I thought those were really healthy. And I'm happy to talk about those. Not even 2 months before Leslie passed away, she purchased a trip for me to go out to the Gorge, which is an amphitheater out in Washington State. For 20, almost 30 years, Dave Matthews Band's done a like 2, 3 day Labor Day camping concert series out there. And I've always wanted to go. The last several years we've had to cancel because of children or her job or the transition of the company, whatever it was. And this was finally the first year where it looked like it was going to happen. And there were other people on her team where she didn't have to be at every event. So she could stay at home with the kids. I could go to this deal. She had no interest. She was not a camper, but she had scheduled myself and one of my best friends to go, who was also her hairdresser. Uh, Jess and I had gone to a few Dave concerts together. I think I even took her to her first Dave show, but that trip was planned. And after Leslie passed away, Jess and I had a lot of conversations about should we go, should we not go, should I go, do I feel okay going, is it right to go? And Jess's husband, Tyler, who's also a distant relative of mine, but I think even more importantly, was a co anchor of Leslie's at WGEM, who did sports. It, he gave some suggestions and talked to him a lot too about it. And we ended up going. And it was a great time. I signed up in the lottery for tickets to a show at Madison Square Garden. That was going to be like 3 months later, and I got tickets in the lottery for that. So ended up doing that. And then the announcement of the summer tour came up, and so I signed up, or renewed my fan membership, signed up in the request period, and lined up bunch more tickets for a summer tour. And I think a year and a half later, I went to 18 concerts, including the Gorge. The Gorge was three of them. If you count that being three concerts, being 3 nights. And so those were distractions. I don't know. At first, I didn't see them as distractions. At first, they were ways for me to unplug from being a full time parent at the absolute most drastic end of full time. Uh, the grandparents were super involved and are super involved and are so amazing. My mom, my dad, my stepmom, Leslie's parents, they all stepped up every one of those weekends and would come up here or would take the boys and make sure they stayed in all of their activities, did all of their things. But there were places where I was able to go and just take a breath and relax. And um, I connected with old high school friends, fraternity brothers and their wives who Leslie and I went to weddings with. So all just different people along the way that really meant a lot. Neighbors up here in Morton who have boys the same age as mine, and they've just been an incredible, incredible family. The Klauses, we went to, I think we've been to 5 or 6 shows together now. So it's just been like one of those things. But I look back now, and what I was doing was using the gaps of time between shows to focus on who was going to go with me, where we were going to stay. I would like make shirts for that show or made these wrist bracelets or would try to spread the awareness of Leslie's endowments through certain swag that we'd hand out at the shows. And all of those little things just became little distractions to where I found instead of sitting in what I really needed and what I was really going through and the pain I was really experiencing, I wanted to throw anything and everything I could. And looking back now, that's just what it was. And it goes back to the old saying of too much of anything might be a bad thing. I don't know if there's too much Dave, but if I'm not spending the same amount of time on myself that I'm not spending on those other items, those other things that take my energy, I think that's where the distraction becomes less good and more dangerous, and can even to slip into things like addictions. Um, so that was a loaded answer to your question, but I think that can be the good, but it's got to be balanced.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds to me like you did what a newly found single parent who is pouring into so many things. There is an importance of taking a pause. There is an importance of finding yourself, your joy, your passions. And while you might have, 18 shows might be excessive to some, um, it might have been exactly what you needed at that time. I mean, I remember the year after my dad passed away, my mom took my sister and I up to Chicago for the weekend, the anniversary, and, tried to make December 27th something different than just the anniversary of my dad's death. And, in the whole scheme of things, I feel that distractions and almost giving yourself something to look forward to um, keeps you in motion. And I think if you stay in motion going through trauma and going through grief, your likelihood of coming out on the other side is way greater than if you just get stuck.
Yeah.
And so don't beat yourself too much over the 18 shows.
Yeah.
Looking at the artwork in your home and other things, I think that Dave Matthews is a good distraction. And tell me about how your kids, your job, other things that, I would say definitely positive distractions help keep you in motion. Because I really think
Yeah.
that's what distractions do through this is they keep you moving towards something as opposed to, you know, away from it or sitting, in it.
Mhm.
And, at what point did kind of you realize, oh, okay, I'm far enough past this that I can see it for what it is and I'm ready to dig in a little deeper than maybe I was the first year.
Yeah, the part of my old job that really worked as far as a distraction is the community your job has. Most professions have you around other people. There's plenty of stats out there. If you sit down and just think about it, if you leave your house for a job, you most likely spend more time with your coworkers who you work directly with on a daily basis than you do your own family. And there were people on our sales team that I easily spent more waking hours with than my wife. And and those the people we spend more time with than our spouses, with our children, than with our family members, most like with that person we lose, is a great sense of community and a great way to keep it moving forward because those people know your favorite restaurants. They have inside jokes with you. You guys might watch the same TV shows. You might both despise the same weekly meeting and you have the same looks you can give each other across the table. And when you are having a really crappy week because of the grief you're going through, and you can actually kind of look forward to like stepping into an office with people that you feel comfortable around is a wonderful distraction. And it's a healthy distraction. And it's easily for me to say again, like, that is probably what I miss the most about my old job is the people I worked with and the fact that it was in the office. We talked about that in one of our earlier episodes about loneliness. Um, Working remote in a house when the kids are at school and there's nothing going on is pretty lonely. There's a branch I can go to, and there's going to be an office that I'll have there eventually, and it's going to be great. And I will start to get that sense back. But right now, that's where I started to realize where some of my distractions were, because I was actually now forced to be in a position where it was just me, and I had to start thinking, oh, I was doing this for that um, instead of for myself, or instead of addressing something with myself. And that's that was that was pretty interesting with that part of it. I think the other it was a it was a distraction. There was also a lot of purpose behind it. Was the boys and I did a lot of trips the first year. We did a lot of travel, and I guess I call that as a distraction. Um, the boys and I went a lot of places. We went with their mom. We were big on taking family trips and doing things together as a family as much as we could. So I wanted to take the boys back at such a young age where they were um, 8 and 6, 8 and 7, that we could go to places and smile, laugh, and enjoy the experience in front of us, even though we were grieving so heavily. And that is by definition, I think, the healthy distraction. Um, did we miss more school than they probably should have? Yeah. But I mean, how much are you going to miss in fourth and second grade? Um,
It doesn't show up on many college applications, that's for
n-
sure.
no, and the teachers and administration were great at, if there was important stuff that was going on in the classroom, I tried to make sure we weren't missing those and we were taking those pieces with us. Um, and I couldn't be happier with how the boys are doing. Like, so the fact that they got to learn that they could smile again at places they got to smile at with their mom, I think was awesome. Did I spend a lot of time planning those trips out and choreographing those opportunities? Absolutely. Um, could I have been focusing on some stuff with myself? Sure, but whatever. I'm happy with it. My therapy was fine. That's what I needed then, and I had wonderful friends in the neighborhood and people like you that were bringing meals by and calling and texting and making sure I wasn't going insane, and that was important. That was those conversations were a good distraction.
It reminds me a lot of 2 things. 1, raising children. There are tons of books on raising children. However, you just immerse yourself in it and you do your best that you can.
Mhm,
And I think in your case, the first year, 18 months, you should give yourself a lot of credit. The distractions that you created for yourself, for your kids. Um, I mean, you do what you can to keep moving and you do really the best that you can in going through something that you didn't choose, but you have to go through it. And the other piece that the work environment talks to is we have our physical fitness, which is obvious,
mhm.
keeping your physical health, your mental fitness, which is like working with your counselor or religious advisor or whatever, you choose on your, but there's a social fitness, which is one of the biggest determinants of happiness. And I think talking about the people you worked with and the importance of going to an office and, the fact that you had that for, a good year, year and a half prior to this current job change was probably crucial in your, continuing to get out of bed in the morning, stay in motion, and really have that social, impact, which is a
Yeah.
really good distraction.
Yeah, and I think I learned it in I heard it in Grief Share. I shouldn't say it was taught to me in Grief Share. I heard it in Grief Share. It was reiterated by many widows and widowers and even people that lost someone close to them, like a child, that there was a lot of things you need to learn to be patient with after grief. And patience in this manner is determined by a calendar 12 months. Like if you haven't let 12 months go by, you haven't let enough time yet to make a decision on on any of these three things, because they're ultimately huge decisions that are made to distract you from the grief you're in. And one of those is a career change. The other one is moving, whether that's into a different home or to a different city altogether. And the other one is in romantic relationships. Those are three things that they really encourage you to wait on because they can end up being distractions from what you're trying to process. and they will eventually come up in an unhealthy manner later down the road for yourself, of how you maybe continue to parent, treat yourself mentally, physically, or get into things like addictions. And where you can't push those things down any further, you start to, drown and numb those burdens and those pains away.
So I know it's important for us to say that we're not experts on addiction
Not at
or
all. Yeah.
distractions. And so I would just like you to touch on, you know, your relationship to addictions and just kind of share your
Yeah.
experience, and to let everybody know before you jump into it that there are professionals that
Yeah.
really guide people through this.
We
I
haven't
do
go we
think it's
haven't yeah,
important.
we
Yeah.
haven't gone to school. We don't have a degree in therapy, addictions, treatment methods. This is this is from experience, and um, I sought after a lot of resources in this. And I think so before even I talk about my experiences, I think some resources to know that are out there. Um, you can go see your general practitioner if you're established with a doctor. If you're not, now's a good time to go do that before something like this happens. Your general practitioner can get you in the door with so many different specialists, and that includes therapy if you need it. They can refer you to an office to get a response faster. The therapist I have, I just Googled one day. This was once again, I started with my therapist years before Leslie passed. I Googled and found like a therapist that I liked. I just typed male therapist and the city, it was that easy for me. Today, because of what happened in COVID and technology, there's apps, there's websites you can go to that can get you in touch with so many therapists or specialized therapists. The boys therapist specializes in grief therapy and youth therapy. So this is a person who specializes in therapy for kids under the age of 10 on grief. And so just the resource in that alone, if you are spiritual, uh, in Christianity, Catholicism, in some of the more popular modern religions, there are religious leaders and people within your religion that can help you construct boundaries for your grief and ways to process them and find additional help that what the church can't provide. Depending on income levels, there's programs like the United Way and Red Cross that will offer assistance, can offer assistance, that are all great resources. So, even a lot of time, our employer, when Leslie passed away, offered so many free therapy sessions that we could take part in. And then our insurance provider called in the first year. I think it was like once every 60 days to make sure that we had gotten these shots. We were doing these hearing appointments and eye appointments and doing other general wellness things. So people in our house weren't getting further down the road. And so when you know of those resources, what it does, it keeps you from getting to a rock bottom. And at least that's what I found for myself. I found people, groups, and places where I could safely share where I was hurting. Um, and so I think that's the important part to know the resources. As far as addictions, I think we can talk about what addictions out there that are familiar with or we may not understand that I can say looking back today, oh, that was pretty close. Like some of the house I live in is big for one person to take care of, especially with two kids at the age that they are. So I'm pretty strict on how I like to have this house clean, and I do a lot of it. And I have a schedule to it, and I like to do it a certain way. Um, Probably probably much further looks like an obsessive compulsive kind of like piece, where you wanna make sure if you feel like it's too much, you have your therapist to talk to about it, you know? I think there's more, uh, general addictions that we hear of that if we don't want to accept it or understand, if we don't have the problem, it's hard to go and seek the help for. And it's a lot of times the people around us that recognize it beforehand, and it's really hard to get that person's attention. And it's things like alcohol, drugs. You can either see things like anger, and not even anger, but like sexual behavior can be another addiction. There's a lot of things that start to take control over a person's life where that item becomes the sole focus. Where we see things like self-care of brushing the hair, brushing the teeth, getting your hair cut, wearing clean clothes, like garbage not being taken out and piled up in the person's home, empty fridge. Um, these are all signs that I was aware of for myself, that I was really sure that to like keep haircuts scheduled, um, and keep some of those little things in my life on the pretty good for the boys and I, um, because it helped me not worry and freak out over the anxiety. I didn't have I don't know if I really battled a lot with the traditional addictions of not being like a heavy drinker. I probably socially drink more. Like Leslie and I just didn't drink a lot. And so as people like came over and brought a meal or we had like barbecues in the backyard, like, I'd have a glass of wine or a beer with someone or a drink, when they came over to visit and see how we it never turned into, like, 8 drinks in a night or, like, needing to drink myself to bed. Um, so all I can say is if you are once again, I think one of the more important things we can do is be established with a therapist,
Mhm.
you know?
And I think what I'm also hearing is having someone be your advocate, whether it's your general practitioner, whether it's your religious mentor, whether it's your counselor, whether it's your closest friend, whether it's a parent, whether it's, a coach that, impacted you positively throughout life. I mean, there's so many different people, and I think just being aware that your everything, Leslie was gone, she would be the logical accountability partner that would be like, "Hey dude, the fridge is empty. Hey dude, we haven't done laundry. Hey, the house is a mess." It would be very easy with a 6 and 8-year-old sons to not have anybody that would even be aware, and it would be very easy for that door to stay shut and for just things to pile up to the point where you may not even be aware of it because you're just in this fog. And so kudos to you and kudos to sharing with others. Just there's many different avenues.
Mhm,
And I've had an experience with a handful of people that have worked with me that have gone into AA. And I heard a song recently by Jelly Roll that talked about nobody walks into those meetings on a winning streak. Everybody's lost at something, and I think when you lose someone that close to you, and you look around and you get on social media and you see people that have the greatest fried chicken recipe, and oh my gosh, that brownie's the greatest thing ever, and all you're seeing is this positivity. It's easy to think that the rest of the world is just on this positive, everything's great, and you look at your life and you're just like, well, I would not choose the life that I'm in now because of the loss. And I think it's super important to recognize that that is normal and to seek an advocate through the process, which you had many, but I think there's a lot of people in the situation that, whether they're introverted or don't work in an office or are already working remote, that, or don't have children or, whatever the case is, but seek out that advocate, seek out something other than, you know, the world of social media that just spirals you down into well, everybody else's life is great, but mine, which
mhm.
then leads you to decisions that might mask the pain. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing.
and I think social media is a pretty big distraction. I've, you know, we've talked a little bit about the running journey as part of my physical fitness has started. I think that's a pretty beautiful example now. Maybe beautiful is a strong word, but what I've noticed in the difference in how I address my running compared to the things in the first year and a half is there is running does not it does not demand my schedule. I have my life and my days going on, and I get my runs in where I can. Um, I have a goal of how many miles I want to run in a week. I have a race I'm going to run this coming weekend, a half marathon, the first one. There's been a big plan and a goal to that, but the plan and the goal couldn't take away from me being a parent. And I think that's been a much healthier approach than, um, well, if we want to go back to the Dave concerts, and once again, those concerts weren't bad. They were needed. They were super healthy. Um, but I put everything else on hold in my life to plan those and be a part of those and be like engulfed by that is probably like the definition. Like I'm no longer engulfed by the things I look to distract myself with. It is a balance in life. It keeps a regulation of my emotions, of my feelings, the things I love to do that I want, I need. In fact, that was a note, probably almost as good of a spot any to start wrapping up the episode. And I'm going to read on my notes so I don't mess it up. But in the moment, not far removed from your grief, the want and the need seem like the same thing, or you can't even tell the difference between the two. And some of those experiences that we've talked about today, Bob, or the experiences that other people going through grief, maybe even as a widow or similar to my situation, is they want a companionship, but they need the time alone. Or you want to stay in bed, but you need to get up and take a walk around the block. You want to drink so you can forget how much this sucks, but you need to talk to a therapist instead to unwind your feelings.
That's pretty awesome. Anything else you want to share in the area of distraction, addictions, and your path?
No, we said it again. Seek a professional, um, no matter at what point you are. We talked about people that we've known in AA. The bottom is where you make it,
Mm-hmm.
no matter if it's with your grief or with an addiction or with where you're at in your life. Heck, if you're tired of being unhealthy, you just got to get up off the couch and go get a gym membership and talk to a trainer. Like whatever you want to do, you just got to get up and create the change. It's not going to be comfortable at first, but it'll usually turn out to be for the better. So,
I always say put a pair of shoes next to your bed. If you put one shoe on and you tie it, you're likely to put the other shoe on and tie it, and you're likely to go somewhere in motion because you now have tennis shoes on. So just remember, what's that smallest first step that gets you in motion towards something that is productive? And yeah, thank you for your take on that. And
yeah.
I think that's a very powerful topic as it relates to grief. And kudos to you, man.
Oh, Bob, thanks for being here today. Appreciate it a whole lot.
Thank you.
I'm Tom Van Ness, your host, Guide Through Grief. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us today. I hope today's episode will help guide you forward. My goal for this podcast has always been to create a safe place for people who are navigating their grief journey to lean on one another and share their own experiences. I ask that you share, subscribe, like, and comment so we know how to best support you. Finally, we rely on listeners like you to help keep this journey going. Guide Through Grief is dependent on the support and contributions from you. Please consider supporting the show and our cause. Visit our social media pages or click the link in our description for more information. Thank you.